this world of funding is really, really messed up in a whole lot of ways. And also it's marketed as the way. You know, it is marketed to 100% of entrepreneurs as, you are not a serious startup, you're not a serious founder, you're not a serious whatever competitor in your field, you're not a person worthy of being talked about and amplified and invited to events and getting the status and the prestige, unless you raise venture capital. And frankly, the venture capital industry, no offense to them, because there are a lot of fine people in that field, but it should be probably about a fifth to a tenth the size that it currently is. It is a bloated mess, and it is an unfair mess, and it rewards a lot of the wrong kinds of people, and it rewards a lot of bad behavior. And businesses that raise venture funding have worse 5-year and 10-year survival rates by almost an order of magnitude than those that don't. I probably was contributing to exactly this problem. In fact, I'm certain I was contributing to this problem. I would regularly think about myself and my business as more important, more serious, more big boy than, you know, someone who was building a small, successful, profitable business.
On this episode of Brews BizDev, our illustrious guest is Rand Fishkin, founder and CEO of SparkToro, and of course, founder and former head of Mods and co-founder of Inbound. And you probably already know who Rand is. He and I have some cocktails we made ourselves, and we talk about the deep-seated inequalities in venture funding, tech, marketing, and what we can do about it, what we can actually do to make changes and turn that inequality around from the inside and the outside. We also talk quite a bit about whiskey and types of whiskey and how much more we know about whiskey than wine. And of course, we get a little bit into his company and product, SparkToro. What's it good for? What does it actually do? And for those of us who are interested in outreach and amplification, how specifically we can use that tool to spread our content to the places that we most want it to reach. So enjoy. Thanks so much for being here and checking it out. And if you dig our content, please subscribe. Let us know what you think and share. Rand Fishkin, how are you, my friend?
Very well, thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time at the end of, what time is it where you are?
4:15 right now.
Yes. All right. That's right. Yeah. West Coast. So we are 3 hours apart. So I'm in late afternoon or late night almost as far as work terms go. Right. And you've just maybe ended the official part of your day. I don't know.
Sounds about right. I mean, I consider this an official part of my day. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, good. Excellent. Yeah. Well, whatever official part we can do while drinking, those are some of the best official
Exactly.
parts.
Exactly. Look at us.
So, yes. Here's to this. Now, why don't you go ahead and tell our viewers and listeners what it is we are drinking?
Sure. Yeah. So, Paul, when you invited me on over email, you mentioned like, hey, we do, you know, your favorite beer or cocktails. And I have been getting a little bit into cocktails the last, year during quarantine. And so one of the things I acquired was a bottle of Benedictine, which I've been struggling to figure out exactly how to use. However, I found this beautiful recipe for a New Orleans cocktail using Benedictine called Vieux Carre.
Yes.
Vieux Carre. And the Vieux Carre is, it's rye, Benedictine, sweet vermouth, like a vermouth de Torino, and cognac, and plus Peychaud's, which is like a New Orleans style bitter, and Angostura, which is a more standard bitter, with a lemon peel. So I made that.
Yes.
I hope you didn't have to like go out and buy 4 ingredients for this.
It was more than 4, Rand. Yes, it was.
Oh, I'm a nightmare.
Truth be told, I was slacking some of when you sent me, I think, like the link to a recipe or something, like, here's the drink. What about, and I was like, all right, let's do that one. And then I looked something up, and I was slacking it to some of the teammates here. And I was like, man, this guy, like, I have to figure out how to like make this. We're going to have to buy this. This is some company card, stuff for sure.
That's right. It's a company expense. It's a business expense. It was suggested by one of your podcast guests.
Yes. Yeah. No, they were very, very amenable. We're good like that over here. And it filled out some of my background rack here nicely, so some of those, and I'm doing a different version than you. So okay. I got the normal version in the recipe, and then on a trip down a couple blocks here in downtown Buffalo away, we have a nice like local like independent liquor and wine store that is like, and they do curated stuff. Interestingly, they have a cocktail club. So Noble Root, shout out to Noble Root. They have a cocktail club, and though I didn't join, I might as well have, because this month, guess what their featured cocktail is?
No.
Vieux Carre. I was like, oh, we're like, this is up. And I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to join the club quite yet, but I might as well. And interestingly, because this whole thing comes about, like you said, because you have Benedictine, they were trying to figure out. So my version doesn't have Benedictine. My version, he said, you know what? He said, we don't have that here. He's like, and I almost always use for this drink, I use absinthe.
Oh, sure.
And so, and also the rye is bourbon in this case.
Okay, I also subbed bourbon for rye.
Nice.
I have only a little bit of rye left, and it was like the end of the bottle and a little bit the dregs, and I was like, bourbon's gonna be fine.
Bourbon's it'll a little sweeter. I thought I had rye, and so I didn't pick any up, and then I had Irish whiskey, not rye, and I was like, you know what? If I'm not going to use the right thing, I'm going to go with my favorite anyway, and I'll go with bourbon. So so I've got the bourbon absinthe. Otherwise, everything else is the same. And I have to admit, though I do a show that features drinking, and I do a fair amount of it, I haven't made probably even a mixed drink in a long time. I do a lot of straight browns in my life, right? Either beer, or I'm just drinking bourbon or drinking scotch. I'm a big Lagavulin fan. I like the Islas. And so mixed drink is one thing, cocktail, full-on cocktail is another. So I'm thinking, like, people are asking me, are you nervous? I'm like, yes, about making the cocktail, like, yes, but luckily no one else will be able to tell if I'm making a good cocktail, right? I mean,
there you go.
It would just be bourbon. It's not. I didn't buy this stuff.
My understanding is the only true way to ruin the Vieux Carre is to overdo it on the Peychaud's, in which case you make it too bitter, and then it's kind of all the rest of the flavor is lost, because Peychaud's is such a strong punch in the mouth. So my cocktail bartender friend was like, oh, you're using Peychaud's. This is your problem. Like you need to, when it says dash, it means like one, large size drop. That is it. Stop.
Okay.
All right. There you go.
Well, then I got that perfectly, because I was wondering, like, what does dash mean? Is that the one thing that comes out of this? It's tiny drops that come out. And so, I think I did 3 of the Angostura.
Yeah.
And I noticed, like, what really carried for me and mine is the absinthe, which I may or may not have done a little, like, more than a quarter ounce on. Yeah. It's been a long time since I had some absinthe, and that really carries to the top. And the way that I've mixed mine, like, it's a very, like, the absinthe is forward.
I have a hilarious absinthe story. So friend of mine and his wife are they've been doing kind of the cocktail in quarantine thing, which I find delightful. I think it's super fun. Yeah. Geraldine and I will usually share like a half a mixed drink a night. But for Christmas, we were like, oh, well, we'll drop off some cocktail ingredients for you so you can make this this particular cocktail. And so I email my bartender friend. I'm like, hey, Andrew, tell me, like, what can I, what am I going to get him here? And I go to the store. I buy all the ingredients, which includes a small bottle of absinthe. And I send Andrew a picture. I'm like, okay, I think this is the right one. He doesn't reply for a while, so I just bought it, went home, and then he texts me and he's like, no, No, that's Swiss absinthe. You must get the French absinthe. That absinthe will not work. The flavor profile is totally different. It will not work in the cocktail at all. Like, you can't give it to him. You got to go back to the store, get this other one. I was like, oh, geez. All right. Well, so I waited a week, went back to the store, got the new one. Then a few weeks later, we had a warm start of January here in Seattle, which was very lucky. And we had an outdoor dinner with our friends. And I was like, hey, Cheryl, Scott, like, you should try. Let's try these two absinthes together, because I have the bottle, right? I bought the one, I bought the other. We could not tell the effing difference. Like, no, Swiss absinthe, French absinthe. My palate is not refined enough. Anyway, so now this is the beef that I have with Andrew. I'm like, well, I appreciate how picky you are, and also, I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe is it like this with everything, where, you know, in marketing world, you know, if you put your title tag a certain way, are we like, oh, no, you can't do that? And it actually doesn't make any difference at all.
Yes.
And like 99% of people don't care.
I believe the answer is yes.
Yeah, maybe every world has its specialists, and you sort of go down the rabbit hole. And,
yeah. And then, you know, it's similar. It's not placebo, right? But it is a similar effect, right? Because you think you're actually experiencing something differently. Because I remember seeing years ago, and I'm using Swiss absinthe, by the way, in this very French titled drink. So, you know, Andrew would be horrified. But he's like, no Benedictine, and it's Swiss absinthe. But yeah, I can't tell the difference. But I'd seen like a study a few years ago, or some experiment where someone, you know, where they took it's not sommeliers. That's not wine. That's not the wine.
Yeah, sommeliers.
Is it with wine too? And then they did actual like double blind and like blind testing, and it was, you know, they came out with the same level of discernment roughly as like the schmo who just kind of walks in off the street, who, as long as you have some kind of knowledge of it, you know, some of those, you know, very fine intricacies maybe aren't quite what we like to think they are in our heads when we're the expert.
This is one thing that I will say I love about cocktails, about beer, and about whiskey in particular, right? So I enjoy wine. I think it's good. I can have it with a meal, but I cannot tell the difference in the top ranges. Even when I'm, you know, I've been on a couple of like wine tastings or whatever with friends, and they're like, oh, try this and try this one. And like, this is the one that was much more highly rated. Oh, I mean, tastes grapey to me.
Right.
And you know, and that's fine, right? But you give me like whiskey, I can nearly name the distillery. Like I can automatically tell the difference between, you know, Highland, a Lowland, an Isla, Campbelltown, like that. That to me, a Speyside, like that is very easy. And distilleries, I can almost taste them. And there's only whatever 30 or 40 whiskeys that are broadly available in the US.
Yeah.
So not that hard. I don't know.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who would probably drink quite a bit of whiskey and could not get that level of labeling down or anywhere close.
It's not perfect, right?
Yeah.
But you could throw 20 whiskeys in there, and I would definitely be able to tell you which is the Lagavulin and which is the Lefroy and which is the Highland Park.
If you get anything mixed up with Lefroy,
and so I can pick out their taste anywhere. But you do that, and you're like, okay, one of these 4 red wines is a Cabernet.
Oh yeah, no
idea.
Yeah, and I wonder. I mean, some of that, unless the wine is like really terrible or really outstanding in some way, because I mean, if you have a few whiskeys in front of you, and if you can't pick out a Lefroy, then you probably have COVID, right? Like you should probably.
You saw the article on like the candles, all the candle reviews on Amazon and Walmart and Bed Bath and Beyond that were like, these candles smell like nothing. Nothing smells like anything. And there's just this huge rise, you know, starting in March of last year, of people leaving terrible reviews for candles. And of course, it's all COVID. They can't smell anything, so they're pissed about their candles not smelling.
Yeah. Yes. Oh God. Wow. Okay. Well, there's the COVID reference, and moving on to, you know, you actually wrote the book, so to speak. I mean, the book might be a stretch, but you know, you wrote a book called Lost and Founder. about, let's sum it up with saying the mythology, right? Trying to debunk some of the mythology around what it is to have a startup and to get to certain levels and, get past the Shark Tank kind of, American dream kind of version of it, where cool idea gets funded, you go, everything changes, right? And you tell your own story as a way of debunking some of those myths. And in particular, moving to today, there's a myth, there's a certain kind of a myth and a certain kind of a situation in the entrepreneurial, the startup, the funding world. That is what actually brought this conversation to be, right? Because you had posted something on LinkedIn about with graphs and a whole example of like, oh, here's what happens if I go out. And of course, and someone posted, and to be fair, someone posted and said, well, all right, well, you're kind of known at this point, so there is, it's not a level playing field, but the point here is like, it's not a level playing field anyway, right? Because even if you were, even if this wasn't the, the third founding and like you didn't have like the reputation and, that people knew you, the odds are not even for that they would be for you as for a woman or for a Black woman or for a whatever, like any kind of demographic change.
Not in the US, or for an entrepreneur who's disabled, or for exactly me, but I'm located in Iowa instead of Seattle.
Right.
Like it's just, all sorts of distributions, like the degree to which the world of venture funding in particular, I don't want to speak to other kinds of funding because I think that other kinds of funding are more generally equitably distributed with some outliers. Private equity is obviously a big one, but this world of funding is really, really messed up in a whole lot of ways. And also it's marketed as the way. It is marketed to 100% of entrepreneurs as, you are not a serious startup. You're not a serious founder. You're not a serious, whatever, competitor in your field. You're not a person worthy of being talked about and amplified and invited to events and getting the status and the prestige, unless you raise venture capital, specifically this venture capital class. And even inside that class, there's sort of, stratifications of prestige and status that you receive from various funds, right? So, there's sort of tier A, and then there's tier B, and there's tier C. And a lot of it is geographic and it's brand name, and it's bullshit. Like very frankly, right? It really is being sold a bill of goods as an entrepreneur to be told that if you are building a business that is small, successful, profitable, lasts for a long time, delights its customers, delights its employees, makes its founders happy, that you are a lifestyle entrepreneur. And that phrase is used as a pejorative. It is used to insult and demean you in order to make you believe that someone like an Adam Newman who made WeWork, or Travis Kalanick who made Uber, or these kinds of things, that those are the people you're supposed to be worshiping. Those are the people you're supposed to be trying to emulate. And everything else is, that's adorable. Run along and play, little kids. When you want to be with the grown-ups and play with the big kids, you let us know, and then you'll have to chase venture funding. And it's pretty messed up. I think there's a ton of mythology and opacity, secretiveness in that world that I believe needs to be made transparent so that entrepreneurs can make good decisions, the best decisions for themselves. And frankly, the venture capital industry, no offense to them, because there are a lot of fine people in that field, but it should be probably about a fifth to a tenth the size that it currently is. It is a bloated mess, and it is an unfair mess, and it rewards a lot of the wrong kinds of people, and it rewards a lot of bad behavior. And businesses that raise venture funding have worse 5-year and 10-year survival rates by almost an order of magnitude than those that don't. Yes. I don't really get, Paul, I don't get what there is to love about it. And yet I say this from a position, I don't know if your listeners know, but I say this from a position of having raised $30 million in funding for my previous business, and running tons of events, speaking at tons of startup events, and being an amplifier of venture capital, and someone who in my previous life I probably was contributing to exactly this problem. In fact, I'm certain I was contributing to this problem. I would regularly think about myself and my business as more important, more serious, more big boy than, someone who was building a small, successful, profitable business. And my comeuppance came, right? Because almost all those people who run those kinds of businesses, they have been much more successful, financially speaking, than I have in my career. So, hey, all credit to them.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and it's I don't know, interesting, ironic, or something. Like the two examples you threw out as the beacons of what people are supposed to be like. We work in Uber. That went how it went. I mean, fine for him. You get to be a billionaire by just like screwing everybody over. And Uber, who, billions and billions and billions and billions, and hasn't quite actually figured out a business model that's going to be like fully useful and turn into a profitable business yet. So yes, so useful on the scale of providing value, actual value into a community, let alone an entire culture. Not great. Not great.
Yeah, not great in a lot of ways. I mean, one of the things I worry about tremendously with venture capital is the same problem that we sort of experience macroeconomically and politically here in the United States. Is this, the two joint problems that no matter your political affiliation, you almost always complain about are, number one, domination of industries by a couple monopolies, right? Like whatever, Comcast has all the power as an ISP. Google has all the power as a search engine and advertising provider. Facebook has all their power. Apple has all their power, right? So like these few companies, which are venture backed, all of them were Amazon too, right? All of them became essentially monopoly dominators of their field. And that contributes hugely to problems like, political donations. It contributes hugely to income inequality, which a ton of Americans on every side of the political spectrum, are upset about. And frankly, like it's very hard to fight against those. And that model is reinforcing of it, because venture capital is essentially seeking monopolies or near monopolies in every field, right? Yeah. One winner, 99 losers. That's the model.
Right. That's actually what they're intending to create.
Right. Yeah. You go, if you and I start a venture fund, we're going to go pitch LPs, our limited partners, the people who put money into us, and say, here's how we're going to find the one winner among 100 losers. Yeah. And the 100 companies we'll invest in among 10,000 that we won't. Right. And so, yeah, you are really building an ecosystem and a structure designed to further inequality, designed to turn, one 20-something white dude usually into a billionaire, and a whole bunch of other people into unhappy customers, unhappy employees, unhappy entrepreneurs in the field.
Yeah.
I don't know why we love it so much. I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, maybe you'll get lucky and get a job in a Facebook farm somewhere, right? Checking complaint reports with a billion other people in a box. Yeah. Yes, job creators. Well, then here's the question I think we can definitely answer right now. And how do we fix that?
Gosh, I think it's a struggle, but I think it is possible to attack that and actually win. So whereas, some of the problems we talked about before we got started tonight, right, with around Texas's power situation and all those kinds of things feel insurmountable, this feels to me like a surmountable problem. And I think that begins with awareness of the problem. Right? You can't solve something until you name it and you explore it and you understand it. Yeah. And venture capital, frankly, for the last approximately 30, 40 years, has not been well understood by most, entrepreneurs, even by most of us who raised money from venture capitalists. We don't understand how they make money. We don't understand how the tax dodge system works. I'm not sure if you're aware. Do you know, I'll pose a question, theoretical question.
Okay.
It's 2010. You and I invest $50,000 in a startup. And last week, we sold it and we each made $10 million from that investment. $10 million that we made. Incredible. How much tax do we pay on that $10 million of profit?
I'm going to go with 0.
You are correct.
Yes.
You are absolutely, you've nailed it, sir. It is $0 in taxes. And this is actually why the venture capital industry exists at all. It's because in the 50s, 60s, 70s, a bunch of wealthy people and corporations like lobbied the federal government to get capital gains tax kind of applied to this, whole mechanism. And it changed the format. You can look up the graphs if you want, but it changed like how rich people made money in the United States, and rich corporations too. They no longer made money by, putting it into a business and making a profit and serving customers. They put it into businesses that grew quickly, even if it was completely unprofitable, and then sold their stock by going public or getting acquired. And so, of course, over the last 20 years, that's the incentive model. This is, again, really poorly understood.
Yeah.
And so I think, to your point, how do we solve this? Number one, there needs to be awareness of the problem, right? And agreement around what the problem is. Second thing is there have to be alternatives, right? So we have to, as entrepreneurs, amplify people who are doing interesting new kinds of work to fund new kinds of people and companies in different ways, even if they're not perhaps as tax advantageous. And we need to amplify those voices and those offerings. So, whether it's Clearbank up in Canada that offers like a really interesting structure for mostly e-commerce businesses, or somebody like Indie VC or Village Capital, or Tiny Seed Fund, which my wife and I are investors in, or Backstage, right, which is a primarily venture investor, but very focused on Black women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color in particular. We can amplify those types of offerings, and we can build our own. So, Paul, I'm sure you saw, right, that SparkToro built its own funding structure. And I managed to go out and convince a bunch of people in my network, hey, here's why I don't think the venture model is great for you as angel investors. And a lot of, agency owners and people who had built and sold startups, folks in my network, I went to them and said, hey, you're going to pay ordinary income taxes on the money you make from SparkToro. Sorry. But I think I can still have a better return for you over the long term than a venture-backed business. And here's how. And out of the 42 people I pitched, 36 said yes. Pretty incredible. Incredible.
Yeah.
So I think those are all things we can do, right? And if SparkToro's model in 5 or 10 years starts getting, a lot of coverage and press, and the New York Times is writing about it, and Wired's writing about it, and I don't know, TechCrunch writes about it. That's not, my goal is not to get covered to get covered. My goal is to get covered so that other people will go, hey, could I get funded like that? And hey, should I be investing like that? Because these venture deals are making me crap. And I think the answer to both of those is yes. I think you should start companies that are focused on being profitable, on paying dividends potentially, on having their options open to them, on not being forced to grow as fast as possible or die in 7 years, right? And that is a model I think can work for entrepreneurs and investors. I think that's part of the solution. I hope it is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, and I like that fits into I'm big into kind of like sociology, cultural narratives, almost like layman's anthropology, especially the American versions, right? So there's such a strong, and when we were talking before we got started about, there's the systemic, like actually built-in problems, institutionalized, here's what the rules are, right? So there's the capital gains tax issues, right? So one side of it is, well, maybe you implement a tax on it. Oh shit. Like that's one side. And maybe some version is likely. I mean, and I've seen some of the numbers, on the, like, if you had a fraction of a percent of a tax, right? Like what that could pay for in this country. And it's not a secret who is pulling the levers behind who the people that make the decisions and that revolving door situation. And so it's also very possible, I believe, in a country like this, where something like that almost like never happens, right? Unless there's some sort of the situation becomes so abject and you have an FDR kind of situation where people are like, all right, well, we'll do anything because we're all screwed.
Yeah.
But on the side of that, to be able to use oh no, you can do this and still profit. Right? We can do it ourselves. We can build something. We can do that, that individual, but together, ingenuity and resourcefulness, and, take hits as we choose to, and then build a better system from within, definitely speaks, I think, more to a certain group of people than let's have the rulers, implement taxes, because some people are against that, right? Just on some kind of principle. Like, I don't know if it's the best principle.
Part of it is principle. But my suspicion is that in a lot of cases with Americans, it is based on identity.
Yes.
Right. So like my identity says that I'm part of this political party, movement, ideology. And so therefore I'm fundamentally against this thing, even if technically I'm not really against that thing. And technically, I guess if I consider it in the abstract, or if neither of the political parties had a point of view on it and didn't tell me how to think, I would form my own opinion, which would be, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And that happens a lot in the United States. If you can find, for example, I think when Kickstarter and Indiegogo began, right? Those are two companies who've built platforms where crowdfunding is possible, and crowdfunding became possible for all sorts of things in the United States. And no one was really against it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, thankfully, neither political party took a stance on it. And so everybody was kind of like, yeah, we like it. It's good. Crowdfunding. Great. Love it. That opened up a tremendous amount of opportunity over the last decade. There are just thousands, tens of thousands of businesses that have been built off of Kickstarter and Indiegogo and home-rolled, self-created crowdfunding things. And that's beautiful. It's just amazing. I love it. Etsy is another great example of that, where it's like, you can build your own store and you can sell online, and Shopify is a great example of this. There was no, sort of particular regulation restricting it, because neither political party got involved. And I think this is, it's tough. It's a tough situation when you mix politics and economics, because I think that there's lots of great reasons to have laws and regulation. And there's also a lot of mess that comes when something gets politicized.
Yes. Yes. Especially when it's one of those top three things that people really, someone takes something and we're going to beat this for the next 4 years. We're going to beat this to death. But like you said, there's the social identity, which runs really almost everything for humans. Like once you learn enough about what actually drives human decision-making and how we see ourselves. I mean,
you would think that, except outside the United States, it's not that common. Right? So like, if you look at political parties, outside of like, especially US, UK, Canada, Australia, right? Where like our cultures are all kind of combined. We have this sort of English language Western thing, right? There's not the like, well, because my identity is X, I don't like Y or Z or whatever. You go to Italy and it's like, okay, there's 5 parties. Does one particularly appeal to, like, I don't know, Italians who have blonde hair? Like, no, it doesn't. Right? It's not that way. And so I think you can get away from identity. It is possible. I think, in the United States, it was not as identity driven kind of pre-civil rights movement. And it,
Mm-hmm.
I think if we could get through the, if we can get over our racist past, right,
Mm-hmm.
and then potentially there's a future where it doesn't have to be identity driven again. That,
Yeah.
again, that's way out of my wheelhouse. I don't know how to solve that.
No, that was my next question. All right, well, let's do that.
I'm reading Stacey Abrams's book like right now.
Yes.
and I'm kind of like, oh man, thank God you're working on this, because I have no clue how to solve these problems.
Excellent. Yeah. I've been reading Angela Davis. So
all right.
a little more extreme in certain areas. But
nice. Yeah.
All right. So to maybe lighten it back a bit. So to bring it back in, and I mean, that conversation, we're talking about SparkToro as a model, right? You did it a certain way, and you did set up the funding
and
of
we've
it.
open sourced our docs. So if anyone wants to go, if you search for SparkToro funding, you will find a blog post. It's ranking well in Google. You'll find a blog post. It links to an open source version of our documents that our lawyer created. We sort of paid extra to have them open source so that anyone can fill in their details. And I believe 4 other tech startups in the US have already used our docs to raise money for their own funds, or for their own companies, which is awesome. It's super exciting.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to see that. I would love for that number to be 40. I'd love it for it to be 400, maybe in a few years.
Yeah.
If SparkToro is successful, it could be.
Right. Yeah. As that success, as the old saying, which sometimes I love, sometimes I hate, nothing succeeds like success. Right. So,
I mean, someone's got to make the path, right?
Yeah. You got to get out there in front of it, and then people will follow it, especially where investment is concerned, investment and putting things on the line. So SparkToro, bringing it back into fun, pragmatic stuff for marketing folks.
Yeah.
Give us the for anyone who's like, oh, cool, and they haven't stopped to Google what the hell are they talking about SparkToro, and if they don't happen to know, because our audience is a little bit, I mean, it's a small audience, but it's very diverse between some marketers, some old school marketers, brand marketers, some tech marketers, some salespeople. That's BizDev, right? And I mean that in the open, like business development, whatever that looks like. And so it's a lot of folks, including entrepreneurs, the small profit-driven kind and some other kind. So give us what's the elevator pitch on SparkToro?
Oh, sure. So the quick version of this company, which is a relatively new company, we've only been around for 10 months now, is that you can instantly discover what your audience reads, watches, listens to, and follows.
Cool.
That's the short version. And the way we do that is we let you search a giant database of online profiles. And you could say, for example, like, oh, I want to know what podcasts are popular with electricians in Canada. I want to know what YouTube channels fiction authors in Los Angeles subscribe to. I want to know what people who use the word t-shirt and logo design in their bio are talking about online, so that I can go do better Facebook and Instagram ads to them. Like all that stuff, all that type of data is available in SparkToro. And so, yeah, lots of people who do business development of all kinds, audience research of all kinds, persona development, and then lots of tactical stuff like I'm trying to optimize my Instagram ads, or I'm trying to optimize my digital PR and link building and outreach campaigns, or I'm trying to optimize my ad spend and figure out which sources people pay attention to, or contribute guest editorials to the right places and pitch for events and sponsorship, blah, 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 blah. So that's what SparkToro is. It's thankfully, it's shockingly easy to use. we have important. Casey and I were, my co-founder and I were texting the other day, and we were like, gosh, we passed 40,000 free users. So there's a forever free account for anybody who wants to try it. And we passed 40,000 free users, and we're like, oh man, we have maybe about doubled our support requests from the time that we had 5,000 free users. This thing really scales. Like, look at that. And I think one of the keys for sure, like I will never go back to this model again, is that Casey, who's the primary engineer, right, does like 99% of the work on the product. Casey himself is on the support email alias. There's only 2 of us, right? So it's just me and him. but he sees every support request that comes in. And so he's like, oh, well, is that confusing to people? I'm going to fix it. I don't want to ever get another support request like that.
Yeah.
Right. And permanent so every time someone writes in, it's like another data point that he fixes. And that it makes for a really smooth product operation process. I wish I had made Moz's engineers, my previous company's engineers, like support people.
Yeah, that's a quick turnaround, right? And so does that play into, I've noticed, and I mean, you notice, because even when it's happening, you say, oh, I know, another feature, right? But there's a pretty consistent rollout of features. So is that because you're actually real time, kind of adapting, where the founders, like the key people, are like seeing the messages and then making the permanent fixes and permanent changes? Is that what's leading to the features?
I would say that drives it's probably about 60-40, maybe even 70-30. So 30 or 40% of the features that we release are driven directly by feedback, one-to-one feedback like that from users. The other 60 or 70% still are kind of in our heads. What did we envision the product to be? And I think that's just a classic entrepreneur thing, where you have a concept for what you want your product to do and how you want it to solve a problem, right? So like, one of the problems that SparkToro can do a great job of solving today is tell me what hashtags architects in California are using so that I can go to Facebook and like target those for my ads or whatever. Mm-hmm. Or I can follow those hashtags and start engaging with people on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and whatever. Mm-hmm. Great, like super. But could we tell you what changes every week or every month? Like if you say, I'm really interested in that hashtag architecture, in California, like I want to know that audience, what is changing about them all the time. Like every 2 weeks, could you just send me like they started listening to this new podcast and they started following this YouTube channel and they started engaging with this social account and they started using these new words and they're talking about this topic and blah, 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 blah. Like, tell me that. That's not something anyone's asked us for. Right. It was like in our heads as, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who will not actively go to the product and search every week and see what's different. They need someone to like tell them, hey man, here's what's going on with your audience. Yeah. Right? Like these are people that you want to reach who you think are potential customers. Let me tell you what's changing about them. So that kind of, I don't know what to call it. Intuition-led insight, intuition-led product development. That's still a big part of what we do. And I think it's hard as an entrepreneur to balance those two, right? Because if we were purely responding to what customer feedback is right now, all we would be doing is adding a bunch more languages. Yeah. Because that is like 60, 70% of the emails that request something specifically from support are like, hey, I did a search in Thai. You don't have any Thai profiles. Nope, we don't. I did a search. Will you have any data for China? No, we probably never will. Right. Do you have any data for German and Spanish? Like, yes, but not until the end of this year. So like, that's.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's a balance. It's a balance, right? You gotta make tough calls about like, well, what do I think is going to be the best thing for the business and our customers long term versus what are we just getting emails about?
Right. Just like constantly jumping and responding.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And and so you roll out, you have a certain vision, which you're constantly fulfilling on and adding to elements to fulfill on that original vision. And you're 10 months in, right? So at some point,
that's early.
You got to roll out an MVP, right? You got to roll out some kind of minimum viable, and then you're still filling in the rest of what you want it to do and learning what you think it should do and responding very quickly to customer requests and demands and inquiries. So it's the mix.
I mean, the MVP thing is that was really hard for me. So we raised money in June of 2018 and rolled out we launched our product in April of 2020. So it was 18 months to get from basically like funding to launch, and we took I wouldn't say we took our sweet time, but we really wanted to have a polished, superb product experience when we launched. We did not want an MVP. I have launched MVPs before. I don't think that if you are going to have a very successful launch and attract a lot of people, an MVP is not the way to do it. An MVP is a fine thing to do privately to validate, like, is there anybody who wants this thing? And we did plenty of that, right? Like by, I think it was early, maybe February of 2019, 7 or 8 months in, we had a like crappy demoable version that I showed to like our investors and a few people in my network privately. And then basically for the next year, I was speaking at tons of events. So I like went to all these events, showed people, went to like their offices and talked to agencies and that kind of thing. I was like, hey, does this seem cool to you? Like, is this something that would help with your problems and process? And how do you solve this problem now? And we got enough people like excited about that we were like, okay, we're onto something. Let's put our heads down over the summer, build out the beta, invite people, and get the product out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that MVP process is, I think it's like a Web 1.0 thing, but it's still in the minds of a lot of entrepreneurs. It's like, that's what I should do.
I mean, I still read it every day on Seth Godin's blog almost. So, right. So,
I got to talk to him, man. Like, what's going on with that?
Like, have you done anything?
Can you imagine? Let's just imagine for a minute, like Elon Musk is like, all right, here's the Tesla MVP. And like they put out a car and it's pretty crappy and it's like worse than pretty much everything else out there on the road. They would have defaulted on their federal loans and like gone right out of business.
But
like,
didn't he do that with a truck?
No comment. But like, they had to release a very impressive automobile the first time around. It had to be truly exceptional.
Right.
In order for them to like prove to whatever investors, potential customers, the market that they really had something. Because if they didn't, they would be doomed. There's too many people paying attention to that product.
Right.
If you're a nobody entrepreneur, no one's ever heard of you, they've never heard of your product before, you can release an MVP publicly. Doesn't matter, right? You're probably going to get like whatever, friends and family and a few people they refer to look at it. So no problem. You're not burning your credibility. But because of the fact that when I launched SparkToro, I had hundreds of thousands of people following me on social channels and, an email list of 20,000 people, 15,000 people, whatever. Like it had to be really good.
Yeah. You can't roll out some dipshit and be like, but just hang with me. Right. Yeah. Just wait.
Can't you see that in the future, it'll be great? Come on, stick with me.
You trust me?
It doesn't.
That's me.
That's not how it works.
Yeah. And probably rightfully so. Speaking of equality.
For better or worse, like I think people like you and I can probably look at a product and say, oh, this has potential. I can see where this is going to go. But if you're actually experiencing the problem and you're trying to decide if you should spend money on the problem and this solution, you need something that really solves the problem and does a considerably better job than whatever you're using to satisfy right now.
No, that makes sense. So let's take that into somewhere, and then I'm going to let you go here soon so you can move on with your other important activities. But so staying in SparkToro, and so we get the kind of generally what it's for. So if someone is looking for something on the outreach amplification side of things, and like here's let's call it hypothetical at the moment, scenario, right? So if I was going to be releasing a podcast and I didn't want to just stick with the normal kind of, here's my audience, here's what it's always been. And so, we do an interview one. So I bring on a Rand Fishkin, right? And I want to, there's some small overlap, but it's generally probably a different audience, and a different audience that's not only, who follows Rand, but also, is into market research, right? Who's interested in kind of what SparkToro does, would be interested in this general conversation. I want to go and reach a whole new bunch of people and engage them well, so that they actually then spread the podcast as far as the eye can see and the ears can hear. What have you been seeing people use SparkToro for, and maybe some of the features, like, what is the thing that they would be doing if they want to have that kind of a goal in that kind of a scenario?
All right. I got a really simple, very direct one for you.
Oh, good.
So Paul, if I were in your shoes, what I would do is I would go to SparkToro and I would search for, there's a few different ways to search, but I would search for my audience follows the social account at Rand Fish. Okay. Right. And then I would look for what are the other sources that that audience follows and pays attention to, and where, like, okay, cool, look at that. Like some of the people who follow Randfish are entrepreneurs, and they tend to follow Indie VC. Ooh, Rand talked about Indie VC. Oh, he talked about Village Capital. He talked about Clearbank. Great. I'm going to make an audiogram of that 30 seconds where we had that conversation about alternative forms of capital and those, those several ones. I'm going to put that out on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I'm going to tag all those companies, and I'm going to drop them a line, the people behind their social accounts a line, and be like, hey, did you see this? Like, people are talking about your stuff on here. If you want the audiogram to share on your own channel, I've got a Dropbox for you. I can't say for certain whether the people behind those social channels will go and amplify it, but is it a great way to get that connection and to make that thing? Absolutely, right? Because I'll tell you, like, very frankly, if somebody goes on another podcast and the podcast host reaches out to me and is like, hey, this person talked about your startup, SparkToro, on this podcast, here's a short audiogram of them saying wonderful things about it, I'd be like, mash the like share button on all the platforms, right?
Yeah. Yes, spread it out.
So that is definitely one way to go. Another thing that I'd probably do, just for safety's sake, I would also look at the 5 or 6 topics that we've discussed here today, and I would plug those in as things people talk about or things that people have in their bio, and then I would go and take the hashtags and the accounts that they follow, and I would probably ping a few of them that maybe I had a connection to and see if they wanted to share. And I would also employ those hashtags, especially LinkedIn and Instagram, and maybe Twitter and Facebook too, just to get the extra amplification that usually comes with hashtags. Nice.
Okay. Well, I may try those exact things, or at least, someone on the team here is going to try those. I'll send them this recording and they can figure that shit out from there. Matt does most of the SparkToro ing and Mozzing and all of the rest of the SEO here. So nice. So I'll give that to him. All right. So the send off here is letting people know, as we reach these additional people for sure, where can they find you, and what's your big takeaway? Like, what's your message, whether it's promo, whether it's just whatever you want to say, just to wrap it up.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of our discussion today has been around the design of systems and how they influence the world that we live in. And I would just urge people, no matter your pre-existing perceptions of whether it's the venture capital field or startups or marketing or tech or SEO, just that you question some of those assumptions and try and pull back the curtain on the forces underneath them, right? Like, why is SEO the way it is today? Oh, because of this history and Google doing these things, and what are their incentives? Oh, I see it. Like, I can feel why this is all happening now. When you do that, your tactics don't get better, but your strategy gets so much better. It is just mind-blowing how much smarter you can be about not predicting necessarily, but knowing what the next few years of the future will look like and being able to take smart actions and smart investments from that. And yeah, if you want to find me online, I am most active on Twitter, where I'm at Randfish. You can obviously get a free SparkToro account if you want at sparktoro.com. I publish on the blog there about once or twice a week. This week's post on spaghetti alla carbonara. I'm just saying, if you want some delicious carbonara, you should probably check out the blog.
Maybe with a cocktail.
Yeah, maybe with a cocktail. No, I do love food and alcohol related stuff. I am big into that. So yeah, if you follow my wife on Twitter, you will see lots of posts of me cooking every night.
Yes. Some folks here have told me about those. I'm like, okay, excellent.
It's been so weird, Paul, to have that experience of like going from, oh yeah, Rand Fishkin, he's the guy from Moz, to, oh, Rand Fishkin, yeah, SparkToro, maybe I know him from, but mostly I know him as Everywhereist husband. It's like I'm a famous husband on the internet.
Yes. What an amazing accessory you are. It's phenomenal.
That is my dream. You know, as a kid, I really dreamed of being a trophy husband, and I feel like I am a little bit.
You
now.
did it. And that's worth a drink by itself. So here's to that. And
screw you, gender norms.
Exactly. Eat it. All right. Well, thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate, I mean, the conversation at all, but certainly that we could tackle something like this that I think really has some meaning to it and some value beyond just the normal tips, tricks kind of shit. So great conversation. Thank you so much. And we'll be seeing you soon for sure.
I really appreciate it. Paul, this is a fantastic conversation. Can't wait for it to come out.
Ooh. Yes. Me neither. All right. Thanks, Rand.
Take care.
Brews BizDev is hosted by Paul Greiner and produced by Renoun Creative. Check us out at renowncreative.com. Are you fucking kidding me?